Here we go.
In progress.
Well, we've got 159 views of our class. So hello to all the people of you who are on Zoom and on YouTube. I hope that you've enjoyed our series on the common good. And we're going to wrap it up today by looking at contemporary voices. The first week of our class, I had mentioned my Rotarian friend, Chris Dunning, who is running for superintendent of Pasco Schools. And I told you on the last session, I would share why he's running. And in the Tampa Bay Times this morning, there's a huge interview of Chris and his opponent. And I read it this morning, very, very interesting in today's Tampa Bay Times. And so let me just share what Chris says, just a little bit of his flyers that he's passing out to the citizens. Dr. Dunning is a dedicated educator who started as a teacher. Isn't it time our schools are led by someone other than a politician? In his 30-plus years, he has been a district administrator, an elementary, middle, and high school principal with tremendous success working with our students, parents, teachers, and administrators. He truly understands the needs of our community. He is also the reigning principal of the year. And so he's very active Rotarian. I have the privilege on Fridays at noon to sit next to him many times at the Rotary luncheons at Trinity. And so I find it very exciting that this guy who has a lot of success as a principal of schools in the district is going to say, okay, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and I'm going to go for superintendent. And he's going against a member of the establishment. I'm not going to mention parties, but it's a real battle. And it's an interesting story in this morning's Tampa Bay Times where they interview both candidates. And I see in Chris a real desire to work hard for the common good. You don't become principal of the year without doing a lot of work. And he's the reigning principal of the year in that district. And so I think he'd do a lot of good as superintendent. We will see what the voters decide. This is democracy. If he gets 51% of the vote, he will be the principal. If not, he will graciously concede. But I just think that illustrates what we've been talking about. What motivates us? Why do people want a public office? Is it for our own glory, our own financial benefit, so I can send money, direct money to my friends and direct money to my companies or whatever? Or is it, I just want to serve the people and I have a record that you can look at of what I've done at elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. This is my record. This is what I've tried to do for kids in our district, and I want to really emphasize that if I win the election. So now I'll pass this around. My wife and I are both voting for him. He's an independent. He's an independent, so this is not part of.
Probably on anybody in Pasco County in this route.
I don't think so.
No, this is from Trinity, so it's right under the border with Hillsborough, right on the border. I know, Bill, you're from Pinellas, and then I'm from Pasco, we're right on the border there. But anyway, I just think that illustrates what we've been talking about, finding its roots in the Old and New Testaments,
Right.
just like Brueggemann says.
I want to say something.
Yes,
You asked why someone runs for office.
correct.
And I would like to say they run in office to improve their community, individual community, the beginnings of a community, not when you said power and everything. I think we need to recognize, especially after this week, I think I've seen people react differently to different things. And It's to the idea of creating an improvement for the common area for them in that area. And it is a very selfless act in the beginning. And I think we need to recognize that with people. It is not something, it's not power, it's not trying to make friends with somebody. It is an act of love and care.
Correct.
I agree. Thank you. I would question that. There's a guy, what would you say? There's a guy that has more direct knowledge of this.
I deal with it every day. Every weekend, nights, days, weekends, holidays, traveling, not traveling. I would say that as an individual seeks an office, they are more idealistic about what they can accomplish. And when they get into the office, they realize that they can't do it. And this is a huge political machine, huge, beyond your wildest imagination. And getting it to move 1 inch is very difficult. Individually, I think that you can approach any elected official and you can see that they are decent people. They are not out for aggrandizement. But in order to get something done, they have to become more public. They have to say things that you would consider to be, in many respects, outrageous, to move that needle a quarter of an inch, and to get other people that are also elected to buy in to whatever that message is. It's extremely difficult. And people think that, the staff members of government are mean or nasty, or they're not. They're just decent folks. And they're caught in a very large trap of regulations.
Bob, an analogy I would offer from an area I have some awareness.
Yeah.
Ministers.
Yes.
I think every one of my fellow students in seminary was idealistic. But this is true. I think the core issue is human nature. And that's where my faith, you may or may not believe in original sin. I embrace it because I think it's true that embedded in us is the capacity for good, and also the capacity for narcissism. I served for a number of years on the committee in Presbytery that dealt with problems.
Oh boy.
And ministers can be as big of megalomaniacs as anybody else.
No.
And do a lot of harm in that. So I think it's wrong to pick on politicians. I think it is human nature to have good intentions and to let yourself, for whatever reason, be led to self-aggrandizement.
And Abraham Lincoln spoke about our better angels. And I think that's a really good concept that Lincoln used. Let's listen to our better angels. The rabbis, I think, have a good perspective on this. If you read the rabbis, they talk about on each of our shoulders, there is a good angel and a bad angel. And our challenge is to pay attention to the good angels. I think that's a helpful teaching from our Jewish rabbi friends, because sometimes as Calvinists, we get caught in this thing that we have original sin and everything we do is bad and all of that. And I think, well, if we have agency, if humans have agency, then we must have some ability to choose which angel we listen to. Am I going to vote for someone that I know will work hard? Or am I just going to sit home and let the corrupt system run it? I mean, I have agency. Am I going to go and vote? I'm just going to sit home. So I find it interesting. I was raised a Calvinist, went to a Calvinist school, and so I understand that idea of original sin, and that is our nature, human nature. But I think I have appreciated being in dialogue with our Jewish rabbi brothers in terms of which angel do I listen to, the good angel or the bad angel? And Lincoln, I think, really got a handle on that in the sense of urging Americans at that time, which was a very, very difficult time of the Civil War and hundreds of thousands of people dead, to pay attention to our better angels.
And quickly, we all know the two wolf story. The bad wolf, the good wolf, the one that wins is the one you feed.
One of the things that I think, I
Say
tell
it.
you,
You don't know that
I
story?
don't know that story.
An Indian grandfather, he's talking to his grandson, and he said there are two, what?
Native American.
Yeah, okay. I accept that. And he tells his grandson, throughout your life, there are going to be two wolves living within you. One that will tear and destroy and kill, the other that will nurture. Granddaddy, which one wins? The one you feed.
one of the things I think you have to keep in mind is that I don't think that any of them start off being corrupt.
Yeah.
It is a series of very small steps, each of which is acceptable. And then when you look back, you say, where was I? And I wasn't at that point. But each one of those steps is reasonable, justifiable, and acceptable. But when they get to the end and you say, oh my God, this individual is so corrupt, they didn't get there overnight.
Right.
The theological doctrine is the total depravity of human beings. I mean, for those of you who studied Calvinism in the catechisms or wherever, it's the total depravity, which means that every aspect of human nature is affected by sin. Total depravity. It's not very encouraging in terms of, animating us to be involved. In fact, it's kind of discouraging to, well, maybe it's better to just to wait around until I go to heaven, which has been the reaction of many people. Many people have taken that route, but I think it's a challenge. Now, I want to just show in this final week some of the resources. Now, I hope you all have this. We try to look at primary sources. So it's not just my opinion or someone else's opinion, but we can say, well, there's a primary source. St. Augustine wrote this. John Calvin wrote this. Apostle Paul wrote this. Brueggemann wrote this. Trying to look at primary sources. And I just think that's the way to go, because so many times we have these half-cocked ideas and just think, oh, I know what's going on, blah, blah, blah. Well, I want to pay attention to primary sources. And one thing that I mentioned about one of my favorite professors at seminary was Professor Shane Berg. And he would always bring a primary source with him. If he's going to talk about some church father, he would bring a book with him and say, this is what he wrote. In Latin or Greek, this is it. And then you focus not on my opinion, but what's the heritage that we received? That's when a couple weeks ago we looked at John Calvin and his relationship with the Geneva Council. So we can say, okay, well, what did he do with the Geneva Council in terms of the refugees? So it goes beyond my opinion, but I can point to something. Now, my favorite living writer is John Meacham. He's an SEC man. He teaches at Vanderbilt. Well, he teaches at Vanderbilt, okay? The SEC guy. These are two books of his. He just wrote a really good book on Lincoln. I think you've got that book on Lincoln from John Meacham. And he was on the informal council of advisors to the president for the last few years. I think he's still on that. And if you read his books, a lot of the language that you've heard from the president's office over the last 2 years have come from these books. So I just find it very interesting in terms of his point of view and how he has really affected decisions made in our country. John Meacham. And I'll just pass this around. Again, this is I'm waiting for him to come to Tampa so I can get these autographed. He hasn't come yet. I want him to show up and say, hey, sign my books for me, please. But good guy, really, really sharp guy. He's a Christian, and I'm very impressed with what he writes. He's the first guy that we have on our handout for this morning. And who'd like to read the first quote from Meacham? Properly understood. Who'd like to read that? Okay.
Properly understood and applied, public religion can be a force for good, and was at the 20th century began.
All right. A lot of you last year were in the class on Christ and culture. And one of the chapters on Christ and culture talked about Christ as a transformer of culture. Remember that? Christ, a transformer of culture. The idea is that the teachings of Jesus Christ are not meant to just stay in our soul or in our brain, but to result in actions that say the culture needs to be transformed. And that's where Meacham, I really like what Meacham says here, where he says religion can be a force for good, can be a force for good. Karl Marx says that religion is the opiate of the people. You all know that, right? That's the Marxist criticism of religion. It just makes you happy and sit back and wait for heaven. That's Karl Marx. But here, I like this tradition, which Meacham writes about. What if religion not only changes us as individuals, but inspires us to be a force for good? Or, to use Niebuhr's words, to be a transformer of what we see. Helen is with our granddaughters at the service downstairs. And I talked to her this morning, and I just said, have you seen a letter that Pastor John sent out? How many of you read their letter? Yeah, this is a really good letter. And I said, John, I said, Helen, there's a fund now. There's a fund for hurricane relief. And I said, I'd like to write a check for that. And so he said, okay, let's do that. That's a good thing. So I have a check, but it's going to be in the envelope when you pick it up. Okay, she always picks up my envelope in the service. So, but I think, I really like that attitude that Pastor John put in that letter. It's like, hey, we're not only going to say our thoughts and prayers, what you hear all the time. Our thoughts and prayers are with you, or thoughts and prayers are with you, but rather, we're going to do specific things. We're going to do things. Come into the fellowship hall. You can sign up to be on work crews, relief crews. There's food being distributed right now in the fellowship hall. When I got here, I saw a couple come in and get a meal. And I thought, this is great. This is a really great thing to do. So there's a sense of we want to be agents of the risen Christ, and agents of the risen Christ, and help to bring about goodness in the world. Comments on that? I feel really good about that. I read that letter and said, that's really good. John did a good job on that. And so I'm going to get a hold of Helen. She's with our granddaughters this weekend, because my son's at some lawyers conference in Phoenix. And so, and she said, oh, that's great. So anyway, yeah, Robert.
Just for common knowledge of the table, I know some people that had a nice 3-story house on Davis Island, but they sold it because that wasn't a good thing for them anymore. And they moved to a 1-story house over in West Shore. And their house had 4 or 5 feet of water in it, and they're sitting right there.
Whoa, me?
No, not one.
Oh.
Wow.
We
I spent the night at a hotel.
lots of hotels. But I just have to say, we are very, very blessed. We're all alive. We are happy to say that, that there's nothing in the house that's worth more than being here and being with people that we love, and so it's all good. But y'all are not invited over for a Christmas party. We don't think it's gonna be ready by Christmas.
Okay, great.
And
Yeah.
we all know this. These kind of tragedies bring out the better angels in us.
Amen.
We
I think
stop
that's true.
arguing with each other
That's
and
true.
help each other and then go back to arguing. It's sad that it takes
Yeah.
these kind of things
Yeah.
to stir within us,
Yeah.
that if you need something and I have it, it's yours.
Yep.
I want to say it was very beautiful because we had not really gotten to know any of our neighbors, and every one of our neighbors came over and hugged us and said prayers with us.
Isn't that
And
great?
Oh,
that
one
was
other
the most
thing.
beautiful
My
thing.
daughter has a house over on Kensington near West Shore, and about a foot of water went in her house. So the
Yeah.
last 2 days, I've been there helping with that. And the reason I bring it up was that 2 different churches that they had been involved with before, there was an army there.
Wow, yeah, thank you, Robert, for sharing. That's really, those are listening to the better angels. And saying, yeah, we can be agents for good in the name of Christ. I'm here because Christ has blessed me and I want to be a blessing to those around who are suffering. Yeah, thank you. Any other comments? Those are good.
I just saw,
Yeah, Paul.
on a larger scale, that trucks heading out from as far away as San Diego, electrical repair trucks and all, driving all the way across country,
Wow.
headed for western North Carolina.
Those people are angels.
And that,
When you see those trucks coming in from all over.
I know many of you have been to Montreat, and isn't that just a beautiful place, Montreat? I've been to retreat, well, it was, yeah, and I just feel so bad that area has been hit so hard, Asheville and Montreat, and I'm sure, Helen and I have walked all the trails around in Montreat, and it's just so beautiful. And, I've seen some images, and I just feel really, really sad.
Western North
destruction.
Carolina also.
Yeah.
Appalachian State's underwater pretty much.
Yeah,
Mass General Store, which I like,
yeah,
and it's
Well,
underwater. The
yeah.
old one, the original.
Robert,
yeah, Bill.
Wow.
during my pastorate, in that part of the bulletin where we shared y'all's concerns, I always quoted 1 Corinthians 12:26. 12 is the variety of gifts in the body. If one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together.
Mhm.
That's to be the spirit that we need. That if you suffer in some way, I'm suffering. And therefore, I act for your good.
What we do does not have to be perfect. Do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. That's a saying that I really like. Do not let perfect be the enemy of the good. And Meacham talks about that, where the next one is, he's referring to President Kennedy, did not see statecraft as a magical or easy life, as Augustine had said long before. It was a pilgrimage. And you notice Brueggemann talks about the journey to the common good. The common good doesn't just happen. It is a journey. And the work of the world is never fully done. Again, Meacham is such a brilliant writer, and his understanding of Christianity. Goodness is an aspirational journey. It's an aspirational journey. We were missionaries in Venezuela for a decade in Caracas, and so my 3 sons grew up playing soccer. Well, they would call it football, but we don't call that football here, it's soccer. They all played soccer in South America, and then they came to North America. And because of where they grew up, they had much better soccer skills than North American kids, because we don't play that, we don't start playing that until later in life. But it was a development. I remember my kids going out on the field as little tights, and instead of swinging a bat or kicking a football, they were running around kicking soccer balls. So little by little, you could see they were gonna slowly develop. Were they ever perfect? No. But it was an aspiration to make the first string or a starter. They wanted to be one of the 11 starters. They each played on the team, and if you were a starter, that was a big deal. I got to start. I didn't have to sit on the bench. But it was always an aspiration, and if you were a starter, you had to work hard, because other people on the bench wanted to take your spot. So you never fully made it, so you had to go to practice, you had to run laps, you had to do all that stuff to be a good player and to remain a starter. And I like that about aspiration. The fund that we're taking right now at our church for hurricane relief, is that going to perfectly solve all the problems in our area? No, but that's okay. You don't have to be perfect, but it will be effective. It will be effective. It is an aspiration to be an agent for good. And I like that, and Meacham just has that right here. That's good. Questions on John Meacham? Bill, how did you like his book on Lincoln?
Oh, the subtitle is There Was Life.
Bestseller. I went 2 years ago. Bestseller. His book on Lincoln. So anyway, Michael Sandel, right here. John Meacham teaches at Vanderbilt, and Michael Sandel teaches at Harvard. And he teaches the very famous justice class for freshmen at Harvard. And so thousands and thousands of Harvard grads have gone through Sandel's class on justice. And this is a book that kind of summarizes that class. Justice, what's the right thing to do? What's the right thing to do? And Sandel looks at the sorry state of America today, where it's divisive, people lie constantly, you can never tell if what they're saying is the truth. So he writes about that, and then the last part of his book is really interesting. He says that we need a new politics of the common good. This is Michael Sandel. Michael Sandel, who's probably now I don't know if I'd say expert, but one of the leading authorities on what is justice. What is justice? How do we understand it? What's going well in justice? What's not going well? What do we do about that? This is Michael Sandel. And the final part of his book is he looks at what would pursuing the common good look like today? What would it look like? We don't have time to go into that, but this is on your handout, and there's ISBN. It's not a long book, but it's really, really good. Michael Sandel, I really recommend him. I'll just pass Michael's book around. And the quote underneath Sandel, the third approach to justice says, justice involves cultivating virtue and reasoning about the common good. As you probably guessed by now, I favor a version of the third approach, which is pursuing the common good. How do we bind up the divisions in our country? Sandel would say, we lift up the common good. And you unite on that, regardless of what party you're in. regardless of your skin color, regardless of the language you speak, we can unite in the common good. And I really like, I think that's a very profound insight. And hopefully some of the graduates of that school will live their lives pursuing that. We'll see, we'll see. We have so many of our senators and congressmen and presidents coming out of that school. Let's get some of them to really work for the common good and not just enriching themselves, but hey, what can we do so that everybody benefits? Comments on Michael Sandell on that?
All right.
Yeah.
I'm very, coming into this class, the common good, it's very hard for me to understand the common good in the United States and across the world. I'm not always so sure I agree with it.
Yep.
But as Americans, we seem to fight the common good. We want to be individuals. And examples of that, the vaccines, the civil rights, the welfare, everything that we do is like me first. And I don't mean to say me first, but it's the interest of, I'm an individual, I have these rights as an American to have my beliefs. And so bringing, and we were talking last night to people that spent some time in Japan and how there was much more, the common good was what flowed through the community. It was what was good for everybody first, and then, like, you didn't step out in the road when you were crossing the street. Everybody stood, even if there were no cars coming. If the sign said don't go, you didn't go because you were not an individual, you were protecting all those together. You crossed the street together. Here in the United States, we walk across the street. Our individuality, I think, and our freedoms are what kind of have taken away our common, or have destroyed our concept of common good. Yet, when I look at the common good in Nazi Germany, that was the common good. The common good was taking care of the common, everybody wanted to do what was right and march the march. So I'm confused about how we perceive as Christians the common good. Is it me, my individual belief in God, and my work towards being the best person I can be as an individual? Or do I reach out and follow the crowd as sheep to do the common good as the group? That's all. I know that maybe that didn't make any sense, but
Yeah.
I've been working on it and I can't figure it out.
One of the books on the list is The Common Good. Hey, that's one of the books on the
Yeah.
list. I recommend it, by Robert Wright. It's a very good book. And in your first handout, his definition of the common good is included. So I hope you have all the handouts. This is a good set of primary source material. And it's footnoted, it's documented, where you can find it. This is how he defines it, Robert Wright. The common good consists of our shared values about what we owe to one another as citizens who are bound together in the same society, the norms we voluntarily abide by, and the ideals we seek to achieve. If there is no common good, there is no society. Remember last week, we were looking at Thomas Hobbes, who talks about the state of nature. The state of nature. It's everybody against everybody else. It's the winner take all, it's a zero-sum game. And then you have people like John Locke say, wait a minute, that we can be a commonwealth, which is Old English for common good. We can be a commonwealth. And I share your concern. If their main goal is me, I don't think that corresponds with the Old or New Testament myself. I don't think that does. And it does not correspond with the best of our heritage, because we don't want to be trapped in nature. We're a state of nature where everything is a battle and only the powerful win. Thomas Hobbes talks about that. And there are many people today, that's what they believe, that the powerful will rule and everyone who's weak or speaks a different language, has a different school color, they can forget about them. Let's just get rid of them. That's common for literally millions of Americans. Millions of Americans believe that. And I think what Locke says and what Robert Wright says in this book, I'll pass this book around, is that there's got to be a sense, a greater sense of community, So I agree with you. I think sometimes we go overboard and say, hey, it's me. I was talking to my son on the way to the Rays game last Sunday with our granddaughters and talking about the class. And I said, when I pull out on the left turn, I'm not sure if someone's gonna slow down for me or keep going, And so I really appreciate people who use their blinkers. I really do. Somebody at a Rotary meeting said, we stopped installing blinkers on cars in 2010. And some people believe this. But anyway, if I'm gonna want to turn and someone's coming and they got their blinker on, I say, oh, okay, thank you for letting me know you're gonna turn. Thank you. And that is part of the common good agreement or the community agreement that we are living together in a community. If someone doesn't turn their blinkers on, it's like, I don't know. And is there some kind of a social agreement that's not being lived up to? And it's a simple example, but I think it illustrates the point. I will stop at the stop sign. If you're crossing the street and you have a green light there, I will stop at the stop sign. I will let you cross the street. If I'm going to turn, I will use my blinker. So I will try to avoid an accident. Simple illustration, but that's what it is, moving from the state of nature where you do whatever you want and the powerful rule. And a lot of people like that, to having a sense of we're going to have the common good and we have an arrangement together. Martin? Yeah.
Just a comment. I can't remember who said this, but I think it was John Stuart Mill about good is something that makes everybody happy. It was a pretty simple definition. I think he said it. Maybe I don't know if some other people. There were so many of those guys, Thomas Hobbes, Locke.
Yeah.
I just remember Mill.
Yeah.
Just trying to define it.
Yeah, and we talked about that this last week, where Thomas Hobbes really shook up Europe by talking about the state of nature. And Europe came out of the Dark Ages where the powerful people ruled. That's the way it was. And whoever had the biggest army ruled. And if you wanted to invade a country, you invaded it. And if you wanted to wipe out a city, you wiped it out. But then you have people that began writing. This is the 1700s, the 1800s, the time of our founders, who were reading this stuff and saying, wait a minute, maybe we can do better than that. Maybe we can start listening for better angels. Well, what if we have a social contract? Let's have a social contract.
Let me give you a real life current story. There was one of my clients who petitioned the variance review board to be able to lift their property. This was in advance of the storm a few months ago. To lift their property to get it out of the flood zone. And they were approved by the variance board. There were a number of neighbors who came out and said, no, it's not necessary. This is on Davis Island. Well, not necessary, you're just doing this because you want to do this. And we don't like it. So when it got to the city council on the appeal, the city council turned down the variance and denied this property owner the ability to lift their property. So this past week, those people who opposed that, every one of their houses flooded. And the property that was being proposed to be lifted. It's now in litigation. I mean, you can read about it if you like. But I think those attitudes
I am.
are going to change. And you're going to see a lot more people that are in flood zones that are not required to lift their properties opt to lift them. And I mean, personally, I'm going to be working with the government to try to get regulations that will allow that to happen without penalties upon them. But the good, the common good shifted from the me to the we.
Yeah.
And I think,
Robert, I know you gotta close,
Yeah, I was gonna say,
but real quick,
2 minutes.
from the Witness and Service Committee, we're the ones that pick what the special offerings are. It may have to go through session. So out of the last 10 years, about 6 of them have been about hurricanes. So you might remember names like Michael and Ian and so forth. This year, we're having a quiet year, so that the first 2 weeks, and we processed 2 weeks of this offering, the peacemaking offering, was for a clinic in Haiti and the seminary in Poland for Ukrainians. We have done a pivot, and this morning is the pivot. The envelopes are out, and we're moving to this. I know that because I know what the totals are so far for 2 weeks for this offering, it's pretty meager. So I know a lot of people have not given yet. So please consider giving hard this morning.
I already wrote my check, but for the peacemaking in Ukraine, so I was very specific what I wanted. That was before it's shifted over. That'd be another whole check.
Do you want us to give the money to the Ukraine, or do you
Yeah.
want us to shift it?
No, I wanted to go where.
It originally
That's
was.
the last
I think
meeting.
it
I'll be sure that we know that.
I did put it on
I
the.
put on the memo for hurricane relief.
Yeah.
So,
The memo.
we are out of time,
And then write
so
down check.
I'm gonna let you give your final prayer or final close word.
Yeah, I do want to thank you all for coming and,
Jeff wants to say.
All right, Jeff, what you got?
Yeah, what do you want to say?
thank,
I want to say that how many people come into our community that drive from all over the world. I mean, really all over the world. And they all have a different habit. People from New York don't even know where they're gonna go on the road. People who come from Iowa, all over, I like to think they fall over road sickness. And people from the West, no telling what they're doing. So, there is no common good that we can attend to. There is a common good that we learn and we share with others.
you saying there is no common good?
That we can,
Not really.
he's saying there's no common good that we can attend to. We have to learn to share
Share the
our
common good.
individual common good to do.
Well, let's go ahead and close with prayer. Oh, just a little bit continue.
I disagree with that.
Oh, sorry.
I disagree
Yes.
with that.
Robert, why don't you go ahead and close us in prayer?
Yep, let's have a prayer. Let's have a prayer. Thank you, Lord, for the chance to get together over these 6 Sundays and to look at what Walter Brueggemann says the Bible teaches regarding the common good and how there is a thread through Western culture that affirms this action. We pray for the activities that are taking place by this church, seeking the common good for those who have suffered from the hurricane. Bless the people who are volunteering even today to help out. And we thank you in Christ's name for the efforts that we're going to make. Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.